Björn Ulvaeus sat quietly on stage, a soft smile on his face. The crowd cheered, but something felt different this time. After years of silence, he was finally ready to talk, and what he said next made everyone gasp. "I have to tell you something," Björn began. "There were things happening in ABBA that nobody knew about. Things we never shared." Fans leaned in. Could it be about the love stories? The breakups? The long silence between albums? Björn didn't blink. He was serious. "When we started ABBA, we weren't chasing fame," he said. "We were just four people trying to survive. And then everything exploded." Back in the early 70s, Björn and Benny were writing songs, while Agnetha and Unheard were performing solo. Nobody thought the four of them would become one of the biggest bands on earth. But it happened fast. Eurovision 1974. Waterloo. That one night changed everything. Björn smiled when he remembered that night. We were so young. So excited. But none of us knew what that success would cost us. He looked out at the crowd again, his voice lower now. "There's a story from the early days. One we never told. We were offered a huge record deal. Millions. But there was a catch. We had to sing only in English, and we had to smile. No matter what." Björn paused. "They didn't care about our marriages, our families. They just wanted the image. The happy band from Sweden. But behind closed doors, it wasn't always happy." This was the first time fans heard Björn speak this openly. For decades, ABBA had been known for cheerful songs and glittery outfits. But now, he was pulling back the curtain. There were nights when Agnetha cried before going on stage. Days when Unheard refused to rehearse. Not because we didn't love the music, we did, but because we were breaking. Björn's voice cracked. "I want to talk about one night in 1979, he said. "It was the moment I knew we weren't just ABBA anymore. We were something else. Something we couldn't control." And just like that, he left the stage. But the story wasn't over. In fact, the truth had only begun to surface. The show they almost cancelled. It was November 1979. ABBA was on their massive world tour, the biggest of their career. Sold-out stadiums. Screaming fans. Flashing cameras. But behind the scenes, something was falling apart. "We were in Washington, D.C., Björn later said. "We'd just played in Toronto, and everyone was exhausted. Agnetha hadn't spoken to me in days." By that time, Björn and Agnetha's marriage was quietly ending. The media didn't know. The fans didn't know. But backstage, it was impossible to hide. They were no longer husband and wife, just bandmates pretending everything was okay. "She looked at me and said, 'I can't do this tonight,'" Björn remembered. Her voice was gone. She was crying. She wanted to go home. That night, for the first time, ABBA almost cancelled a show. The pressure was immense. They were contractually locked in. Promoters warned them about millions in losses. But Björn did something unexpected. "I told management we'd delay the concert. Not cancel, just delay. Give her time to breathe." And then something happened that would never be written into the official tour book. Unheard sat beside Agnetha in the dressing room. They were often portrayed as opposites, Agnetha, the golden-haired angel, Unheard, the mysterious brunette. But in that moment, there was no rivalry. Only friendship. "She held her hand," Björn said. "Frida told her, 'We're in this together. One last time.'" An hour later, the stage lights came on. And ABBA walked out, hand in hand. The audience never knew. They screamed with joy, thinking it was just another perfect ABBA show. But for the band, it was the night they almost fell apart. "That performance," Björn said, "wasn't for the crowd. It was for us. To prove we still had something worth fighting for." But deep down, he knew, something had changed. And what came next would shake the band even harder. The song they were afraid to release. After the Washington concert, ABBA kept touring. The crowds got bigger. The songs topped charts in more countries than they could count. But behind the scenes, they were running on empty. The friendships were fraying. The marriages were already gone. And yet, they kept writing. Then one day, in a Stockholm studio, Björn brought in a song he'd been working on. It wasn't like the others. It wasn't upbeat. It wasn't sweet. It was dark, almost painful. "I called it Just Like That," Björn said years later. But something about it felt too real. The melody was haunting. The lyrics spoke of something disappearing, a love that dies without warning. Benny laid down the chords on the piano. Agnetha sang the first lines. Then she stopped. She looked at me, Björn recalled, and said, "Is this about us?" I didn't answer. The truth was, it was about them. About the silence that had replaced the laughter. About how they had built something together, and now it was slipping through their fingers. The irony wasn't lost on anyone. They recorded it, finished it, mixed it, and then, they locked it away. We all agreed, Björn said, that the world wasn't ready to hear it. Or maybe, we weren't ready to admit what it really meant. The song never made it onto an album. Fans didn't know it existed. Not until decades later, when a short demo leaked online. For hardcore ABBA fans, it was like opening a hidden chapter of a beloved book. And they had questions. Why was it shelved? Why did Björn look so shaken when it was mentioned in interviews? Why did Agnetha refuse to talk about it? Björn finally answered that in a 2023 interview. We weren't just singing songs. We were telling stories from our lives. And that was too close. It was the sound of us falling apart. For years, fans had danced to Dancing Queen, smiled to Mamma Mia, and swayed to Fernando. But just like that was something else entirely. It was the truth. After recording it, something changed in the studio. There were fewer jokes, fewer smiles. They stopped hanging out after sessions. And by the end of 1982, ABBA quietly disappeared. No farewell tour. No goodbye album. Just silence. But that song, the one they were too afraid to release, stayed locked in a vault. Waiting. Björn never said where the master tape was. Only that, maybe one day, someone brave enough will bring it back. What fans didn't know at the time was that this wasn't the only song that got buried. There were more. Unreleased recordings. Lost footage. Personal letters. Things ABBA never wanted the world to see. Until one phone call changed everything. In 2018, a young producer from Stockholm reached out to Björn. He had found something. Something that could bring ABBA back, or tear them apart for good. And what Björn did next left everyone stunned. The call that changed everything. It was a cold morning in Stockholm, 2018. Björn Ulvaeus was having coffee when his phone buzzed. Unknown number. He almost ignored it, but something made him answer. Mr. Ulvaeus, a nervous voice said. My name is Eric. I'm a producer working at Polar Studios. I think I found something you need to hear. Björn paused. He hadn't stepped foot in the old studio in years. ABBA's final sessions had happened there. It held memories, both beautiful and painful. What did you find? He asked. There was a long silence. Then Eric said, an old tape. It says ABBA, unreleased, do not use. But there's a track, it's not listed anywhere. Björn's heart skipped. Could it be one of the lost songs? Maybe something from the Voyage sessions that never got finished? He told Eric to wait. An hour later, Björn was standing in that familiar old room. The walls hadn't changed. The same wood panels. The same grand piano. Even the same smell. Memories flooded back, laughter, arguments, music echoing through late nights. And now, this. Eric slid the tape into the machine and pressed play. At first, just silence. Then a soft piano. A few chords. And then, her voice. Agnetha. It was raw. Unfinished. She was singing a melody no one had ever heard before, not even Björn. I wrote the lyrics, Eric said softly, from a notebook I found in the archives. It looks like something you started, but never finished. Björn stared at the pages. It was his handwriting. Lyrics scribbled during ABBA's final days. Words he had written, and then walked away from. The song didn't have a name. But the chorus repeated a line that hit him like a wave. If we meet again, let's not pretend we never broke. Björn closed his eyes. He remembered everything. The tension. The silence. The goodbye that never happened. He turned to Eric. No one else has heard this? No one, Eric said. Björn nodded. Don't share it. Not yet. But he knew. This was the key. The missing piece. Something personal. Something true. He called Benny first. Then Frida. Finally, Agnetha. They all said the same thing. Are you serious? Björn said yes. He wanted to finish the song. Together. Not for money. Not for fame. Just one last time, to tell the story right. And for the first time in nearly 40 years, all four members of ABBA met in the same studio. They didn't talk much at first. Just sat. Looked around. Shared quiet smiles. Then Agnetha whispered, let's record. And they did. That day, ABBA came back. Not to relive the past, but to finish what they started. Fans had no idea. The world didn't know. But the reunion was real. The pain was still there. But so was the magic. What happened in the months after that session would surprise even the most loyal fans, because ABBA didn't just record one song. They recorded an entire secret album. The hidden album they made in silence. The news never leaked. No paparazzi. No studio insiders. No rumors. ABBA was back in the studio, and no one knew. Björn called it the most peaceful recording experience of my life. No record label pressure. No stadium tours. Just the four of them, alone with their memories, their instruments, and their truth. But this wasn't the ABBA of the 1970s. This was a band that had been broken and healed. When they stepped into the booth, something strange happened. It was like time froze. The harmonies were still there. The voices were older, wiser, but they blended like they used to. Benny sat at the piano and played the first notes. Frida hummed along. Agnetha closed her eyes and began singing lyrics that came from old diaries Björn had found in his attic. These songs weren't made for charts, Björn said later. They were made for us. They were confessions. The album was never planned. There was no release date, no public statement. But as the weeks passed, more songs came pouring out. One song was called Winter Came Early, written about the emotional freeze that followed ABBA's sudden breakup. Another, The Letter I Never Sent, was based on words Björn had once written to Agnetha and never gave her. Frida's solo song on the album was a standout. It was titled Before the Curtain Falls. It was about aging, regret, and the love that survives even after the music fades. When Frida sang it, there wasn't a dry eye in the studio. She cried while recording it, Björn recalled. And I cried listening. They recorded for months, in secret. And as the songs grew, something strange happened. They began to forgive each other, not with words, but through music. The final track was a group decision. They all agreed on it. The title? No More Silence. It wasn't just a goodbye. It was a release. A letting go of all the weight they had carried for years. The fame. The heartbreak. The pressure to be perfect. When they listened back to the final mix, no one spoke for a long time. Then Benny said, "We've done what we needed to do." But Björn wasn't sure what to do next. Should they release it? Should they keep it locked away, just like the lost songs before? That question haunted him. Then, one day in 2021, while walking past a group of fans outside a studio in Stockholm, an older woman shouted something that stopped him in his tracks. "Thank you for giving us closure." Björn turned around. "What did you say?" She smiled. "We never got to say goodbye. We never knew how it all ended. We still wonder." And that was it. That night, Björn called the others. "It's time," he said. "Let's give them the truth." What happened next would shock fans all over the world. Because ABBA didn't just announce a comeback. They planned one final surprise that no one saw coming. The goodbye show that broke the internet. The news hit the world like a thunderbolt. ABBA was returning, not with just a few songs, not with just an interview, but with one final show. And it wouldn't be just any concert, it would be the first and last time they'd sing their secret songs. Live. Together. No flashy world tour. No press junkets. Just one night. One city. One performance. And when fans heard where it would be, emotions overflowed. Stockholm. Their hometown. The city where it all began. Björn called it coming full circle. Tickets didn't go on sale. There were no online sales, no scalpers. Instead, ABBA handpicked the audience. They reached out to fan clubs, old crew members, past producers, and even the woman who had shouted, "Thank you for giving us closure." People who lived the music, Frida explained. Not just people with money. People with memories. The show was set for December 3, 2021, a quiet winter night, just like the lyrics in one of their new songs. No giant arena. No glowing digital avatars. Just a small, candlelit theater. 500 seats. No phones allowed. And then, the world found out. A leaked message online said, "ABBA's final goodbye is happening tonight, and you won't believe what they're going to play." Social media exploded. The hashtag ABBA finale trended in 40 countries. Fans gathered outside the venue, crying, holding records, singing under the snowy sky. News cameras arrived, but no one was allowed in. Inside the theater, the four of them stood on stage. No costumes. No special effects. Just Björn with a guitar, Benny at the piano, and the voices of Agnetha and Frida rising softly into the silence. They opened with The Letter I Never Sent. By the end, many in the audience were wiping tears. Then came the long-lost track, Just Like That. For the first time, it was played live in full, with raw emotion. And when Agnetha sang the chorus, you could feel decades of silence melt away. They didn't speak between songs. The music said it all. But then, just before the final song, Björn stepped forward. He held a small envelope in his hand. "This," he said quietly, "has been sitting in my drawer for over 30 years. It was meant to be a goodbye letter. I wrote it, but I never gave it to any of you." He turned to Agnetha, Frida, and Benny. Then he opened it. He read, "I don't know what happens to people who share a dream and then wake up apart. But I do know this, whatever we had, it mattered. It still does. And I hope one day we can look back, not with pain, but with peace." The theater was silent. Until Agnetha walked over and hugged him. They ended the night with no more silence. No encore. No press statement. Just a final chord, and the four of them walking off stage hand in hand. The next morning, fans woke to a message on ABBA's official website. Thank you for waiting. Thank you for loving. Thank you for listening. Goodbye, for real this time. And that was it. But even in goodbye, one final secret still remained. Björn's final secret, what he hid from the world. The world thought it was over. ABBA had said goodbye in the most perfect way, quietly, honestly, and together. Fans were still rewatching leaked clips, whispering about the lost lyrics, and praising the raw beauty of the unreleased songs. But Björn Ulvaeus wasn't done. In the weeks after the final concert, he kept to himself. He declined interviews. Didn't post on social media. Even his closest friends said he seemed distant, like something was still left unsaid. And then, in a private radio interview in early 2022, Björn dropped one final bombshell. There's one more song, he said. But it's not for ABBA. It's not for the fans. It's for someone I never got to say goodbye to properly. The host was stunned. Who? They asked. Björn's eyes watered. My father. Suddenly, everything made sense. For decades, Björn rarely spoke of his family life. While fans obsessed over his marriage to Agnetha or his friendship with Benny, very few knew the truth, that his father had passed away just as ABBA was taking off. He never saw us win Eurovision, Björn said. He never got to hear Dancing Queen. And I always wondered what he would have thought. In the madness of fame, Björn had buried the grief. The songs kept coming. The fans kept cheering. But something had been missing, a moment of closure with the man who taught him how to play guitar, how to write lyrics, how to dream. So in secret, Björn wrote a song. No one else was involved. No Benny. No Agnetha. No Frida. Just him. Alone at a piano. Pouring everything he had into one melody, part lullaby, part farewell. He titled it, I Wish You'd Seen Me. In the lyrics, he sings to his father like a lost friend. I stood on stages, gold in my hand. But missed your face out in the stands. They called me legend, they sang my name. But you were gone before I came. Björn never released it. Never played it live. But after the final ABBA concert, something changed. He felt lighter. Braver. And one night, in a small room with no cameras, he recorded it. Just one take. Then he sealed it in a wooden box, alongside handwritten lyrics, family photos, and a letter addressed to my children and grandchildren. The box was delivered to a private archive in Sweden, with instructions. Do not open until 10 years after my death. When asked why he kept it private, Björn simply said, ABBA belonged to the world. But this song, this one belongs to me. The world may never hear it. Or maybe, someday, decades from now, a new generation will. But one thing became clear. Behind every chorus, every harmony, every glittering performance, there was a man who still carried a quiet sadness, a few unfinished words, and one last melody he never needed applause for. And with that, the story of ABBA truly came to an end. Not with noise, but with peace. And maybe, that's how legends say goodbye.